Hockey is pretty famous for allowing their players to fight on the ice. However, there are rules to the NHL's fisticuffs. Welcome back to Breaking the Ice, the series where I am teaching you everything you need to know to be a new fan of hockey this season. The first documented fight during a hockey game actually took place in 1890. And for a while, fighting was actually pretty dangerous in hockey. Nowadays, as modern, well-adjusted people, we actually put rules in place to make sure that hockey fighting can be safe. As defined by the NHL rulebook, a fight shall be deemed to have occurred when at least one player punches or attempts to punch an opponent repeatedly, or when two players wrestle in such a manner as to make it difficult for linesmen to intervene and separate the combatants. And once that line is crossed, those players are actually allowed to fight. All other players on the ice must clear the area of where the fight is taking place, and a fight has to take place between two players individually. You can't jump in and try to help your teammate in a sort of 2-on-1 type of WWE situation. However, if you liked, you could start your own fight with another player on the team and have your own sort of dance at the same time. However, if you were on the bench when the fight started, you cannot get off the bench and try to get in on the fight. While you will see players drop their gloves as though they are modern-day duelists, players cannot take their helmet off to fight. If your helmet does come off during the fight, because fisticuffs can be rather physical, you will not be assessed an additional penalty for that accident. You cannot rip the jersey off of your opponent because that would be very ungentlemanly and also not very cute. However, if your opponent does not have their own jersey strapped down the way it's supposed to, the player who did not have their jersey attached correctly would be assessed a game misconduct penalty. And of course, while this does feel like the Middle Ages when it comes to dueling, you cannot use weapons in the fight. That would include things like utilizing your skates or your stick. It has to just be a gentlemanly exchange of punches. Also, fighting is meant to take place during just the actual gameplay of a hockey game. If you find yourself fighting outside of that, you will be subject to an additional fine. You also have to be careful how often you're fighting. And of course, you can't fight forever. Eventually, the referees will break up your fight, and that can happen for a couple of different reasons. One player can actually fall and hit the ice. So if you ever see a fight that ends because one or both players end up on the ice on top of each other, that is one instance where you will see referees break up a fight. And of course, a fight just might run its natural course. However, once the referees do tell you to stop, if you do not stop fighting and allow yourself to be separated, you may find yourself with an additional penalty. Now, when the fights end, you will see the players involved actually separated and both given a 5-minute major penalty. And when it happens, you're often going to hear it referred to as 5 for fighting. And more than just those penalties can be assessed if they feel that it is necessary. And so fighting in hockey can seem pretty dramatic if you've never watched the sport before. But when you realize that it's actually pretty well regulated, it starts to feel like the best type of sport for fans of Regency romance. If this is your first season watching hockey, be sure to drop any questions you have about the sport down below. I'll be sure to include them in the rest of this basic series, and be sure to follow along for the rest of Breaking the Ice.